Cool, man.
If you need like beta testers for me, let me know.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, actually, I also wanted to talk about that too. So the stuff that you referenced early in the presentation, stuff that was presented at Black Hat by Marche and the Core CI guys, they that stuff is actually a little bit different. So what they're doing there is they're not doing.
What to win?
Wow, excellent.
Well, it's commercial, so I have no idea what it's about.
Okay, so what they're not actually doing they're not doing SQL automation. What they're doing is they're doing an automated platform for advancing penetration testing. So what they do is
Yeah, that is my incentive too.
so what they're doing though is very interesting. But they're not working on like automatic detection of vulnerabilities and automatic resolution. They're working on ways to propagate the exploit once you compromise the machine. So the issue here is that if you
Hello, are we ready to go? Okay, this is a distributed denial of service panel, and I'm John Gilmore. I'm chairing the panel. I have nothing to say about distributed denial of service. My job is to keep you guys and them in line, prevent you from denying each other service. So what we're going to do is go down the line, have the panel introduce themselves, and then open it up to you guys to ask questions and move into the topic from there. When we start with Mixter.
Yes. You want me to do an introduction, right?
Of yourself, yeah.
Yes. All right. My name is Mixter. I am I have probably most people know me as Mr. DDoS or something like that. I've written some of the first public DDoS tools in late '99, TFN2K. And since that, since the beginning of 2000, I'm working with the Israeli security company 2Access Security, which besides penetration testing does a lot of product research and development. And we're also heading with one of our projects in the direction mitigating DDoS and doing something against DDoS. And right now this is like my main project, working on this IDS solution of my company, and yeah.
Okay. Doug?
My name is Doug Song, and I'm actually an employee of Arbor Networks, where I work on solutions to distributed denial of service and wide area traffic monitoring analysis. Basically, we're looking at the problem from really a traffic engineering viewpoint. That a lot of the problems caused by DDoS can be effectively countered by some very sane and dynamic traffic engineering practices. Additionally, we're also looking at things like routing infrastructure attacks, which we think are looming on the horizon. And I'll probably have more to say about what we're actually doing a little bit.
I'm Scott McIntyre. I work for Access for All Internet. My perspective on this is sort of as a victim of DDoSs. Obviously, internet service providers have to deal with a lot of it. Also, we have to deal with it from the side of our clients who are using these tools and causing problems for the rest of you. So there's some traffic analysis, also some social analysis of trying to figure out why it is that certain people are more targeted than others. And that's pretty much it. We're just sort of looking at it from a different point of view.
I am Sven Dietrich. I am with the CERT Coordination Center out of Carnegie Mellon University. And my perspective on this is that of a victim. You might have seen my presentation yesterday. CERT was attacked in May of 2001. I wear two hats at CERT, and one aspect is looking at analyzing DDoS traffic, DDoS tools, and I'm also working on simulation and modeling of DDoS attack using formal models and simulation models.
My name is Dave Dietrich. Fluffy Bunny doesn't like me, apparently. I work at the University of Washington as one of the primary incident responders. I've done a number of analyses of distributed denial of service tools over the last couple of years. Most of my free time seems to be taken up by that. I've come at it from the perspective of somebody dealing with a large series of agents on our network, we tend to be the source of DDoS attacks pretty much constantly. So I've been getting into Unix forensics and reverse engineering lately to try and deal with the modifications to these tools as they come up.
That's it, we're done, you can go.
So, we're looking for questions from you guys. What do you think? What do you care about in distributed denial of service? Why are you here? What?
Could you please use the microphone?
Microphone, please.
I am André Koopal, one of the IRC-net IC operators. Of course, a heavily attacked subject. So let's first try to find out why people are trying to do this.
Why?
That's easier. That's easier than finding a solution. Well, it's maybe I can say something about that because I was very involved in understanding how this started and like other people here too. But it all started on IRC, like with IRC wars, takeovers, and stuff like that. And it started as a matter of DOS, like a single DOS, as a matter of getting people out of IRC, letting them time out, or even taking an IRC server. And like from these simple forms, people of course naturally developed countermeasures, and it came even difficulter and difficulter. And so attackers use even more and more sophisticated and brute force. And so they went to coordinated DOS, where they went logged onto multiple shells or coordinated with each other, and then finally DDoS agents. So it started on IRC, and then when like media attention was on high, like it started going to websites and to other companies and like other targets.
Also, I'd like to throw in a lot of the why of DDoS is associated, I think, with sort of the sense of ownership that happens with the electronic world. Now, it's tough to say that something is yours electronically, with the exception of like an IRC channel. People feel that it's their home, it's their electronic home. They feel that certain websites are personal or they're private. So DDoSs are often the result of revenge against people who threaten their home. So, another dog comes along and pisses on your fire hydrant and you want to take revenge. And that has a lot to do with the whys of the targets, especially with IRC. People, as you know, as an IRC operator, we get a lot of people who come on, change ownership of the channel, kick people off, etc., and that fires it all off. And then, of course, you have the immaturity factor of the revenge begets revenge begets revenge. The tools become more sophisticated, more delayed. They're triggered based upon successive logins, hours, or days in the future. So the whys are usually associated just with the lack of ownership and control that a lot of people feel over their electronic environment, and it's their way of saying, this is mine, and you can't have it.
Actually,
Yes, one of the effects I see now is that it is going to be a real denial of service because the IRC operators start to shut down the servers. How is the people doing it reacting on that? Do they see it as a win that they shut down another server?
They have their own servers. It's fine. If they want to keep on talking to their friends, they don't need to use ERCnet or EFnet or whatever.
Well, I would say it goes a little, now it goes a little beyond like defense and revenge, and it's more than childish stuff. It's like kids playing Mafia or something. 2 weeks ago I heard something on EFnet that was like, I don't know if it's scary or ridiculous, but people are actually DDoSing channels, big popular wares or whatever channels, and they're getting money for taking over a channel. They have like anonymous payments, and you packet the channel, you take it over, and someone else of some crew gives you actually money because it's a well-visited wares channel. Yes, I had the same reaction when I heard that, but that's actually happening. So there is more than this one motive.
So there was a moratorium put on Ike last week for Ike features because it's an ambiguous and complicated protocol. And Bellevin was one of the people who started the moratorium on Ike features. This is related, I swear. So some of these same people want to put hacks on top of IPv4, like ICMP traceback and host identification protocol to prevent things like this happening. And it seems like it's the same problem. TCP/IP was kind of, in certain ways, ambiguously defined, and the underlying protocols are ambiguously defined. And so my question is, in the opinion of the members of the panel, are things like this a waste of time? I personally think that they are. Would just going to, this is a sort of ignorant kind of thing, but I'm sure people are curious, would just going to IPv6 fix all of these problems? Would it fix all of these spoofing problems and routing problems and things like this?
Maybe for France and Japan, but not for the rest of the world. Certainly, I don't think IPv6 is going to roll out globally anytime soon. Just due to the size of the default free routing table would just blow up in people's faces. But and besides that, IPv6 is not really the answer. The problem really is one of resource consumption, right? That it's too easy for someone to command a large number of agents to aggregate their bandwidth downstream and totally pummel their victim. It really is sort of the only way to really address distributed denial of service is with some sort of distributed solution. Things like the various pushback and traceback mechanisms that you've mentioned, that Bellevins iTrace there have been a number of different initiatives where people are looking to do things in band, in IP, to be able to push messages back from the victim. Either to do that, well, there are basically three mechanisms. Either that pushback, or there's a probabilistic packet marking technique which will also require to change the IP to do really correctly. Or there's the out-of-band just logging and correlation, which people do manually today by telling to the router, looking at their ceph tables and what have you. I think only the third solution is really the one that is really going to work. It's what people use today. The trick is in trying to automate it and make it work faster without human intervention.
So setting up filters on the routers?
So basically pushing back tracing the trajectory of the attack back to the ingress point closest to the actual source of the attack and filtering it there, or wherever you have more capacity to actually do that. If it's in your border router, that's probably the best place. If it needs to actually go upstream, if your own upstream link is completely saturated, you have to have the cooperation of your service provider, and nothing that you can do by sending these pushback or traceback messages upstream is going to help you if you can't get anything out. So I think it has to be an out-of-band solution, and I think it has to be something that's an analog to what people are doing today. There's no magic protocol that's going to solve these problems.
I agree, but how do you think you would effectively solve the problem, but without breaking the N10 model and smart ends, dumb middle? How do you keep that and yet work? Is there an ideal solution to? Well, do you think?
I think so, but again, my company is working on the product. So it's,
obviously.
But I think the solution will be to integrate with the existing network infrastructure, and not to require vast changes to either the IP protocols, the way people use them, or the infrastructure that people have in place to do this monitoring. I think the deployed infrastructure that people have already is largely sufficient to do the traceback and filtering that people need to do to address these attacks. It's just that there's not enough manpower. A network operator's time. I mean, Scott can probably attest to this. Sitting down and combing through these ceph tables and looking, trying to correlate flows between all these routers and then figure out which interfaces they're coming in on, and it's just really it's a waste of time. I mean, there are things that very skilled network operators should be doing that aren't related to firefighting, and I think that there's no magic bullet. It's going to be something that's going to make their lives a little bit easier, but it's not going to take the human out of the loop entirely.
Well, what you said about having your protection closest to the source is something interesting. Maybe I can elaborate what my company is trying to do. There, we're trying to get the problems at the sources, And the one important point is certainly to prevent intrusions in the first place, and prevent DDoS controlled traffic as well, of course. And so what we're doing is like we're developing an IDS that will be like little black box. It will be open source, but it will be in a black box. And what we're trying is like there will be a lot of features and a lot of not only exploit detection of all kinds of traffic. So our strategy is to go and approach the background providers or general providers and get them to install an IDS solution, ours or another one, directly at the source. So that that there's not the potential that so much malicious traffic actually goes through the net infrastructure unnoticed. At big ISPs or, for example, like that. But however, there's a problem of privacy, of course. So this solution, it would be better if it's open source and if it just detects specific intrusion patterns and not anything else.
Well, the thing is though is that all IDSs do is give you time to react, and they don't really stop anything or protect you from anything. And on top of that, like if you get flooded all the time, like the 300th time that you're paged at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's.
But it's if you have detection, it's it's a big step forward, because there's no longer relaying on some hosts or having a network of compromised hosts, and there's not the anonymity. As long as you at least detect it, you don't have to block it, but as long as you at least detect intrusions at the source and at the infrastructure.
I disagree, but it's outside the context.
Okay.
Well, as Doug was saying, traceback is not really going to work as a defense. I mean, traceback is designed to help identify the agents that are flooding.
Accountability.
Yeah, well, but say you're a victim and you get a list of 10,000 hosts that are flooding you. How does that help you?
Well,
You've got to now try and contact the owners of 10,000 systems.
Yeah.
But Dave,
So-
those are the spoofed ones. This is what traceback is about.
Well, yeah, so there are some limitations in traceback. What Mixter's talking about in trying to identify the hosts on your network that are flooding by instrumenting the network
Oh, I
gives
see.
you, as one of the sites hosting some of these 10,000 systems.
So that would assume that like you're on the physical segment and that you can like do a RARP and see like
Well,
which physical IDS
not
is
necessarily
syncing.
being on a physical segment, but okay, so like, look at us, the University of Washington, we've got 50,000 end nodes. If we have 100 systems that are flooding traffic, our job is to go find those 100 systems and deal with them. So
Okay.
right now, it's a totally manual process. And as Doug was saying, it's a huge waste of time. I mean, with Code Red, we had 3 people spending like almost 20 hours a day
Wow.
trying to go through logs, identify who owns DHCP assigned Windows 2000 default installs, and trying to explain to them what to do. So somehow you have to have really good instant response capability that allows you to quickly identify the machines and give you the ability, if you need to start throttling traffic or blocking traffic from those systems. And then you've got to go do all the other mitigation things.
So one last thing to bring around. So I didn't get a clear answer. Like I know IPv6 is like maybe will not be deployed for a while, but does it have the mechanisms within the protocol itself to prevent the majority of these problems that we see?
No, because as a packet switch network, I mean, it's going to be best effort. I mean, people have also proposed like various QoS solutions, to address this as well. But in the end, it's going to be I think it really has to be a network engineering sort of design decision to provide some sort of feedback mechanism across the wide area, so that if indeed some point at the edge it is being flooded, that you can filter, push that information back upstream to be able to take some remediative or corrective action, some rate limiting or something else closer to the sources. And IPv6 will not help you with that. IPv6 will with IPsec will provide you with authentication and such, but that just means you know who's flooding you. That doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there has been some discussion of, what is the next internet protocol suite going to look like, and how can it address some of these problems? And people have been using the model of telephone switches as a good one, where you used to have signaling in band and black boxes, red boxes. It was trivial to get around these things. So trying to do some sort of a solution so that you have out-of-band control and you can do better control of the traffic. those kinds of features, those things, 10 years down the road potentially could be a solution.
Okay, thanks.
If I could hear a brief comment or an extensive comment, even better, from each of you. Our audience here is fairly representative of some of the top minds in the academic world and the commerce world and the political world. If each of you could give a comment on developments you'd like to see from the people involved in commerce, what you'd like to see from either the political arena or the academic arena, and the same for the academics from the political or the commercial arena, or the folks who'd like to comment on what you'd like to see politically. I'd like to hear something from each of you, please.
I'll start out. The thing that I've been saying whenever I've been in forums where people have been looking at this from the government perspective and the economic perspective, if you are the victim of a DDoS attack like Yahoo, E-Trade, etc., if your business model is one where you can only survive an outage of 4 or 5, 6 hours before your company goes out of business, you're on really shaky ground to begin with. And so, I mean, you laugh, but literally, I've had people tell me there are businesses that cannot withstand a 6-hour outage, and they're on the internet. So I immediately say, well, okay, who was the brilliant person? The CEO, obviously, they got the big paycheck, and he's out in France now on vacation. Somehow, people have to start thinking about this differently. If the infrastructure for the internet is as fragile as it is, it may not be the place to be doing business that has that kind of an uptime requirement. So just getting people to think about things like insurance, making sure that government agencies understand there may be some real reason for requiring product liability and for enforcing those kinds of things. You can't just give a total hands up and let everybody go throttle, full throttle ahead. We may be building this thing way faster than it can withstand this growth. Well, everything's insurable, although you need good actuarial data, and that doesn't really exist for security incidents. So right now, we're just at the beginning of trying to quantify what it costs to do the security up front, the proactive things, what it costs to do mitigation. A lot of these things like code red, you keep hearing numbers for damages. I think those numbers are just sort of pulled out of a hat. I've done incident response on DDoS networks for years, and we don't really even have a tracking system that keeps track of how many man hours we spend. So I can't really say what the damage is. I can sort of estimate it based on prior incidents, but the cost is way larger than most people even want to think about. And so how do you convince somebody who has a large network like a university that you need to actually have the staff and have the policies in place to do proactive things to prevent all these systems being vulnerable? That there's a cost trade-off for everything, and if you always pay on the end during an emergency and then forget about it, you never address the fundamental problems. What product or service would like to see business develop to deal with that? Not as much a product or service as sort of an acknowledgement that research universities, institutions that take grant funding from federal agencies have a responsibility to do security on those systems, that you can't just leave these networks wide open. That's one of the problems that I've been trying to deal with for a while in the University of Washington, that there are systems that are purchased on grant funding that pays for the hardware. It does not pay for system administration. It does not pay for patches, operating system upgrades. It does not pay for mitigation if something goes wrong. There are also products that get put in places like hospitals where the vendor solution is based on like a Solaris stock install with third-party software on top of it. And once it gets broken into, the response is, oh, well, I walk in with my CD-ROM, I reinstall, and I walk away and bill you $300 and say, good to go. So, I mean, how do you get that kind of change in mentality of the people that produce software, who sell value-added products, who buy those products and install them on networks that are essentially wide open?
Well, my comment would be that I can't make any recommendations as far as commerce, but what I like to see at least is for people to read the recommendations that have been given in the last year and a half at least. If I just go back to the basic report from the workshop that CERT held in November of '99, and people keep asking, well, what should we do about DDoS? Well, the first thing you should do is read that report. There are some basic recommendations that still some people have not followed, and then basically cry and say, well, we were ahead, what should we do? Well, have you read the report? You could have made some taken some proactive measures here, and yet you have not taken them. So it is important to be informed of what is already here and then move on from there. You can't just wait to react, like they were saying afterwards, but take some measures to even limit the impact that even the agents can make in the first place, such as ingress-egress filtering, such as securing the hosts on the network, taking some appropriate steps for filtering other than the ingress-egress. And from academia, I would say it is important to try to understand these problems further. We're trying to do that at CMU. It's trying to simulate this and model the attacks, see if we can discover some methods that is yet unknown to mitigate these attacks. And it would be nice to have other institutions do the same.
I think things could be also a lot more easier if more people, more big companies would start to implement more secure standards. Like every operating system, no operating system right now has an excuse for not having IP6 as an option in the default install or something. Like in Windows NT, okay, maybe you can do it, but Windows 9X or XP, it's not possible, and these are what most people are using, and like router manufacturers, like using mandatory ICMP traceback support is certainly something that would help if it's deployed in the future, and having some kind of organization starting to think about a global IP6 infrastructure, like more than just tunneling over 6-bone, would help, because you have to eliminate spoofing, and that's my point. You have to eliminate this. It's at the very core of the problem, right?
I think Doug disagrees, but
okay.
I think one of the things that I would like to see most is better collaboration between the various elements. I think that right now we have academia is doing their very best. I worked in an academic environment for a long time myself. I know what Dave's talking about when you have people who are buying systems that all they look at is the grant cost of being able to implement a piece of hardware and a piece of software. The problem then comes at the collaborative effort between them, the vendors, between commerce and so on. You have a lot of these organizations who have this nickel and diming mentality of charging for each little upgrade and each patch, which doesn't always fit into the federally funded way of working. So there needs to be better collaboration between the funding models that are possible between organizations and how they get their money, how they can physically spend their money, and then how a company can provide the service. There also has to be less of this SEP field surrounding the commerce and industry problem itself. That is, when they make these products, they're saying, okay, we've done it, we've built it, we're going to walk away, now it's your problem. And I think that with better communication between industry, between politicians, political activists, between developers of tools that help defend as well as help assault these types of environments, there can be better collaboration and understanding of what these tools do, how they work, how to protect them. Right now, everybody is really looking at their own little proprietary environment just a little bit too much, which is making it very difficult for the conversations to take place. So I think that one thing, certainly from our point of view in ISP, is it would be nice if there were a little bit less finger pointing. You talk to them and you can get a better solution. The question was, would stronger laws against it help? I'm not necessarily a fan of stronger laws of anything. I don't really... I think that you can legislate it until you're blue in the face, but that won't stop it from happening. I think that Dave's point about insurance and better awareness and legislation which will require commerce and industry to be more open, laws which help rather than prevent and block, maybe. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the people who are being attacked and are being used by the attacks, and getting them involved in the process. And you don't want to legislate them. You don't want to legislate the end people. You want to encourage rather than discourage.
Right, I totally agree with Scott. I think that legislative fiat will do nothing to solve the problem because in many cases it's outside the realm of jurisdiction. I mean, for instance, well, maybe not. I mean, so for instance, what are you going to do to secure all the hosts, say in Korea or Japan or what have you? I mean, at the last Usenix, Hobbit from the Loft was walking around with a big sign with a big circle with a cross through it, with a list of ASs in Asia that he wished that people would just black hole. But the problem is that that's not politically, well, that's not really a viable solution. And political measures will help, and certainly security best practices will always help. But the thing is that software is not improving in terms of security. There's always going to be problems. There's always going to be the catch-up game, and then it's always going to be a losing battle to try to secure systems before they're attacked. The problem is that we have to work better on our response, on which is really spotty at best, and groups like CERT trying to coordinate such efforts have been a big help, but we're not doing enough of it. For instance, service providers really should, in their SLA, their service level agreements, have certain clauses that make concessions to DDoS or a different attack or security incidents that they may need assistance on. There may be it's raining. There may be lots of other things that groups can do to work together to provide these systems, and there may be tools that people can build to help automate the process. But I don't think that anything the government can do can really effectively take care of the solution by itself. In the end, it's really going to require the cooperation of many disparate groups, just by raising the awareness and sharing information.
Yeah, I had one more thing to what Doug was just talking about, automating tools to make this easier. One thing you're starting to see with the installation of rootkits, with DDoS tools, is the use of rootkits to hide them, including loadable kernel modules. So you get in a situation where, as a responder, to go in and do forensics becomes extremely difficult because every vendor supports file systems a different way, different tools are available on the system by default. People aren't often prepared. They don't have tape drives. They don't have SCSI interfaces. So sometimes it's difficult to get programs in and out of the system. So some research into better methods of doing forensics on a system, better ways of suspending the operating system and capturing memory to allow you to go in and figure out what is on the system. Because these tools are constantly changing. You've got to figure out how they behave. And then try to respond usually to more than one system at a time on your network. So there's a lot of research that needs to go on there.
And additionally, like Mr. said, cooperation to help prevent IP spoofing and such, via basic egress filtering or unicast reverse path forwarding or whatever will help. But in the end, it's really that's not really the crux of the issue. I think all the hype that was surrounding Windows XP and all this about IP spoofing. In the end, it's all a moot point because attackers will just compromise more hosts. I mean, the number of hosts that were compromised in this latest Code Red infection is just astronomically high, and they're all backdoored. And someone has access to all those machines is probably installing lots of interesting things on them, and those are all real hosts. There's no need for them to IP spoof.
I think what you're saying is like the improvement of infrastructure and coordination is very important. But that's also one point that has improved a lot drastically in the last few years. But it's still the question if it's going to be able to catch up with the equal increase in incidents and in massiveness of these incidents. I mean, this the compromises like now, like with an incident response structure like globally, like it was like 3-4 years ago, it might have taken months to clear all these hosts. That's certainly an improvement, but on the question if laws should be a part of this infrastructure improvement, I'm not so sure. I mean, you have first of all, you have to ask if a law escalates a situation, if it's going to make it more interesting for people, or if people are going to be like so angry about laws that they take some kind of unethical actions that they wouldn't otherwise. Like you see, the White House is like becoming increasingly a target, and might have something to do with the legislation. And so I think. As long as the law is ethical, I mean, the other side has to think about it as well. The laws have to be ethical. They have to like correspond to constitutional standards and stuff like that. And if it's not possible to mitigate a situation like DDoS with laws that are within these ethical and constitutional boundaries, then laws are not the solution to go. Or not a complete solution.
So you're saying that Germany should not put people who write DDoS tools in jail?
Certainly, yeah.
Question. We are now concentrating at the hosts that are being hacked. Don't we want from there come to trace back the host that's sending the commands, and from there tracing back the people who are sending the commands to do the attacks? Don't we want forensic on that area?
Yeah, but I think that network operators really don't care. I mean, it'd be nice to be able to find someone to prosecute, but they just want to stop the problem. I mean, if you end up spending more time actually trying to hop on IRC channels and log people's conversations and stuff, I mean, I don't know. Maybe Scott can speak to this better.
Well, I mean, obviously we care. From an ISP's point of view, we want to stop it. We'll do whatever we can
to stop it.
It's just when you look at the numbers and you look at where certain providers exist in the line is what it comes down to. You need to have the better cooperation from the higher level, the higher peers that are really transiting the traffic. We're fairly large-sized for the Netherlands, but that's the Netherlands, and it is a global problem. And so it becomes a higher level issue, and how to solve that.
Well, I have a comment on that one. You're assuming in this case that the attack is actually live talking to the handler or the agents. What if the mission is pre-programmed, such as code red? There's no live interaction between the agents or the handler with the attacker, and in fact, the mission is alterable in some cases. You will not get to the attack necessarily.
Next.
One last.
Can you
Oh,
let someone else have? Thanks.
I wanted to come back to a question of costs. Every time something like I love you or code red 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, someone leaks out some figures and someone leaks out some facts, and they're spun around the globe in a couple of seconds. And then no one ever questions these facts and figures anymore. Why is that? Or do you have actual figures, how much it costs?
Well,
what the damage is? Besides flipping the pages of the log files.
Several days of sleep.
I think I can't directly answer that question. I leave that up to the other guys, but I think there is like really an increase in costs because of forensics, which are a new field. And like you have the police moving in, and you have forensic experts moving in, and this is like it really does help, but it is it's sophisticated work, and it takes a lot of money, and so that's part of where the costs come from. But I certainly don't think that anyone is making, like, the real media is necessarily making up real costs for that. Like, it's not like anyone has the technical merit who, like, the masses don't have the technical merit to understand that and to say, yes, this is okay or not. So I leave the question with the costs up to other people.
Well, the cost estimation I can't really speak to, but with respect to actually the facts and figures that you see, the various statistics that people are posting with regard to the rate of worm infection, the number of hosts being infected, all this. Most of this has been sort of ad hoc, collaborative, communal log posting, essentially. There are some groups, my company included, that are doing some direct monitoring of large portions of the internet to actually detect such scans directly. And those figures you will probably see fairly soon. But I know that other groups have posted things like that based on the large swath of address space that they have, and doing some basic inference based on the way that the worms propagate. If you assume that there's an even distribution, an even distribution of randomness across the IP range that these worms scan, then if you have a large enough portion of that address space to monitor, then you can make some interesting inferences. But by and large, most of those figures are all ad hoc.
I mean, obviously, we have real numbers from an ISP point of view of rates of infection or attempted infection because we look at our own web logs. It's very easy to analyze those figures very simply, and certainly the rate is very easy to monitor as well.